Yes, cheers to all. That's a good thing to say. Hello, everybody. And here we are on episode 66 of What is Truth? And I'm here with Reverend David William Parry in London in somewhat merry old England. And I'm here in the Motor City in the beneath the Politburo of Michigan, here in the US of A, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, just like everybody else. And only thing is, I've noticed that there was a problem, perhaps longer than most people, since I've been trying to figure all this out for 45, 50 years. And the more I look at it, the more problematic it becomes. And in getting into understanding this, it's good to remember that Jesus Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world." So if you're letting your happiness depend upon everything working out here and being a bed of roses, well, good luck with that. And so, hello, David. How are you doing there, Reverend David?
Well, what a good question. Yes, I confess, off air and on air, I look windswept. I just rushed back from our Yule service at St. Valentine's Hall, which, of course, officially, as of today, I mean, it was our anniversary service. We've been there 12 months worshipping now. And it was the day when we were all absorbed back, if that's the best phrase, into the liberal Catholic tradition. We had a few issues with them, to say the least, which was not to do with their theosophy and not to do with their anthroposophy. It was more to do with the fact that they didn't like us doing things like that in practice. They like talking about it, but we like doing those things. We like including those people. We like including Jews. We like including Muslims. We like including, oh my God, pagans. In other words, all men and women of goodwill who are looking for the absolute. We like including everyone who's doing that, who categorizes that way into our services. That apparently was a problem for them. Anyway, all water under the bridge. We're back in that tradition now. I'm actually quite, does that mean at the end of the day you'll hate this, John? Am I some sort of weird Catholic anarchist just looking for trouble? But I don't answer that, please. Don't answer that, please. So that's me. My knees are giving out. The weather's appalling. It's absolutely freezing. There are sort of serious weather conditions across the country. What else? Struggling with France and Germany moving into compulsory vaccination territory. If that is ever introduced here, let me promise the political party that brings it in, I will spend the rest of my life bringing you down. Let me swear that and promise now. Tory or Labour, let me promise you, if that is ever brought in here, I will do my best to destroy you as a political entity, because that is absolutely beyond the pale. Chancellor Merkel, and I promise I'll get off politics, has sort of let it be known she's on the way. She's softening. What do you mean softening, woman? Softening to the idea of compulsory vaccination. Absolutely appalling. Apart from that, Ireland is putting on restrictions more. They're hoping to force Boris. Is Boris sober enough to actually realise what is going on? So anyway, they're trying to force him into doing something. So is it merry old England? I don't know. I mean, we had a brief chat a minute ago. Curiously, it comes up in my new book. What is the source of all this toxicity in British society? And I sort of tab it up. This will sound antique for everybody. I have it down to the Norman invasion in 1066. I'm sorry, what can you do? That it all went bloody wrong there, okay? With their introduction of serfdom and all the rest of it, and we've got to fight back once and for all. So that's me, John. I don't know where the services are going from now on. I mean, certainly we're not going to give up the Valentinian element in what we're doing. We've been very firm on that. And also, we believe that we're doing things, correctly. We had a 20-strong choir come and accompany us today because it's our Yule celebration. We meet one Sunday, the first Sunday of every month, one Sunday a month. We celebrate the mysteries as far as we understand them in an awfully inclusive way. We had a choir join us today. We're fingers pointing at Yule, and we're looking forward to a lovely time. It's a pressure time. It's a monstrous time. It's a beautiful time. It's trad and it's glam and it's everything in the middle, and it's absolutely beautiful. I love Christmas. I love this time of year. That's how I am. How are you?
Yes, I'm trying to compartmentalize my life so that I can get up some of the festive decor that's required for this time of year. And normally I would already have that going, but I was distracted by dealing with massive amounts of leaves falling from the trees and not being able to get them down as expeditiously as I had hoped. Ah, yes, there you go. Advent calendar. All right. Let's hear it for white chocolate bunnies. But, so I you get into this and everybody, like I was on the phone with my buddy Joe Visconti, who ran for governor in Connecticut a while ago. He's going to be down in Florida and Mar-a-Lago, and he owes Roger Stone a lunch, so that'll be interesting. We're seeing if we can kind of push or shove our way into the roster of activities and have some fortuitous result, but we'll see about that. And Christopher Strunk was on with us, and all three of us were putting our heads together trying to figure out the dilemma here in the colonies. And to be perfectly honest with you, here in the States, it's going to be up to the states themselves. And with what's going on regarding the up and coming court decision with Roe v. Wade and all that, I feel they're going to have to strike that down because there's no constitutional basis for it. It's something that would come under the purview of the states as far as the authority to do it, and that will cause migrations of people based upon their political views, so that there'll be more people moving into New York and California and places like that are hotbeds of people who think like that. But I go back to what was said by Rebbe Ilan, and where he said that when you get into trying to understand Sodom and Gomorrah, he said, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed not because people were evil. There's people doing evil all over the place every day. It was that they codified evil into law. And that's why it was destroyed. And so I think for this country to enter onto a path of blessedness, we have to remove things that are codified into law that are in violation of the Ten Commandments. I mean, it's a real simple no-brainer to figure it out if you look at it judiciously. But as far as try to understand some of this, there's a book that came out in English recently. It was translated from German by a fellow named Stefan Hartmann. And it's the Michael Prophecy and the years 2012 to 2033, Rudolf Steiner and the culmination of anthroposophy. And in there, Joe sent me a photo shot of a page, and I'll share some of it with you. It said, it's headed Christ, the Lord of Karma and Cosmic Intelligence. And Hartman says, an important thread in the theme of the cosmic intelligence is the relation of beings who bear karma to the Christ being who now works in the atmosphere of the earth in the form of an angel, the etheric Christ. This etheric Christ is the Lord of karma. References October 7th, 1911, Rudolf Steiner's lecture. And he continues, for the karmic will inherent in each being that bears karma to come about means that the beings in question come into a proper relation with the Lord of karma, which is Christ. The set of relationships between the Lord of karma and each set of people who have karma to work through is a subset of cosmic intelligence. Rudolf Steiner explained that as a result of Ahrimanic influences on cosmic intelligence, karma has come into disorder. The Ahrimanized angels refuse to carry out their duties in connection with karma. These duties can be described thus. When karma between two human beings requires adjustment, the angels of the two people must first meet and arrange the details. The Lord of karma oversees the arrangements so the karma is worked out in the way most beneficial to the human community. The Ahrimanized angels refuse to follow the will of the karma, the will inherent in the human beings with whom they are connected, and thus fail to guide the karma on its true path. Disorder came into present-day humanity. In the following lives on earth, the experiences of men were no longer, all of them, rightly coordinated with their karma. This is the chaotic element in history of recent times. This has brought into history of recent times more and more social chaos, chaos of civilization, and the disorder that has come into human karma can find no end, for a split has taken place in the hierarchy of the angeloi belonging to Michael. And he references August 8th, 1924. And he goes on to say, Rudolf Steiner goes on to explain that Michael is bringing order to the karma of those who go with him. Indeed, he states that what unites members of the Anthroposophical Society is that they are bringing order into their karma, which can be a messy process. Steiner states, if a member notices in the course of his life that he is entering here and there into relationships that do not conform to his karma, to his innermost impulse, well, I can't continue on because I only have a screen grab of that one part. So if we kind of get into that, you see that there's this disruption regarding groupings of people in karmic relationships. And since Christ entered into the earth and he is intimately here and present for all of us, is it a fact that we're capable of being able to unite ourselves with the proper administration, shall we say, of our personal karma as it relates to the world at large. And the shortfall has to do with the unwillingness or inability of people to be able to begin to respond to the proper cosmic intelligence that is a gift of the divine spiritual beings that alight upon our destiny. And this has to come from above. It can't come from below. But so many people are basing their decisions on that force of being that comes to them from below and the life of the senses. And so we're seeing things going into a granulation. Things are getting more and more fragmented. Families are on non-speaking terms because they have different views about the way social organisms should be put together, and disputes in members of churches and everything is, it's all going to pieces. And so what's needed, and it's a homeopathic remedy for mankind, is that there has to at least be a small group of people that are willing to commit themselves to a higher purpose. And so that's kind of like what I'm doing here. I'm just hoping I can like throw some chum on the water and attract a few fish, and maybe be on the side that's moving consciously upstream instead of just being carried along downstream by unconscious forces.
Yeah, the last time I heard about a chum line was when Jaws the movie came out, and it was, oh God, what was that man? I can never remember his name. He was Richard Dreyfuss. Was in charge of putting the chum line out, and then Jaws turns up, overacting as usual. And I thought, my God, that rubber shark has just outacted Richard Dreyfuss. So there must be something quite wonderful in this movie, which there was. He turned up in a movie years later, Piranha, where he delivers some of the same lines in the same wooden way. So let's hear it for Richard Dreyfuss. Communities. I tried to make I wrote repeatedly to the Christian community of the Anthroposophical Society, hoping we could ally and collaborate with them in one way or another, and was consummately ignored with every single exchange which never took place. So yeah, I wonder who's actually, rather like your good self, looking to really collaborate. I mean, certainly at Valentine's Hall, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find people who want to collaborate and then discuss and discern where that leads to. Where do we go from there? But, without surrendering our traditions and our cultural treasures without that, I don't want you to be a Muslim. I don't want you to be a Jew. I don't want you to be this. I don't want you to be that. The modern idea seems to be harmony comes through becoming a quality, an attributeless blob. But I don't really see that as harmony. That's nothing. Let's hear it for Jews. Let's hear it for Arabs. Let's hear it for Muslims. And we are what we are too. So how can we all work together? How can we find common ground? How can we build bridges? That strikes me as very exciting. Certainly that's what we do on this show. So I'm looking at, oh my God, perhaps I'm in an abundance of such relationships. We're doing it at Valentine's Hall. We do it on this show. I'm honoured, certainly, to be part of this collaborative investigation into much more in some ways than defining what truth would be as a term, because more than that cannot be done. It can be experienced, but that's an individual and personal thing. It can't be discussed beyond a linguistic level. So we're trying to, obviously, so that's what we're trying to do here. Yeah, I mean, anthroposophy actually is an indirect and huge force on me. I can never really explain why it's indirect, but it is indirect. At least so far it has been in my life. I've had this sort of flirtatious relationship with Rudolf Steiner House near Baker Street in London across the years, and it's sort of, I'm a member. Was a member. I became lapsed, and I'm a member again. So the sheer potential, I think, is beyond doubt. And of course, its links with the arts I find very exciting. I get rather snooty about things to do with dance because I rather like experimental modern dance. I get very snooty about poetry. If John Barnwell ever wants to see me at my worst, just bring up some terrible poetry and try and hold me back from commenting. That will show me at my absolute worst and least saintly. But you can always tell who's a true poet because I just tend to go quiet. I remember first discovering Tony Harrison and went, that bastard. The Oxyrhynchus, that bastard. I'd love to have written that. So, that's the sign of poetry, isn't it? What is this show and what are people trying to do? Yeah, I think we're doing more than looking at chum lines. I think we're establishing or trying to establish the rudiments of discourse, which is only in disrepute in certain areas of our society. And no one wants to question the validity of that disrepute. Who are the sorts of people that hold such things in disrepute, and why do they wish to do that? It's just this sort of, everyone's got a, oh my God, he's gone off the screen again. This is where David panics as always, because I don't know what's happening. And can I do my slot? Can I hold forth without lapsing into a medley of songs from Oklahoma? Oh my God, John's back. So, yeah, I mean, there are sort of, the vociferous atheists of our times. Sorry, there have always been atheists, some of whom are almost worth reading. You know, I mean, if you're looking for atheism, right, Richard, I know Richard loosely. If he ever hears this, he'll never speak to me again. Don't read Richard Dawkins or The God Delusion. It's very well written, but there's not a single new idea in it. It's what everybody else has said. So don't read him. Go and read someone like David Hume, who I couldn't respect more, the Scottish Enlightenment. You know, look at what the problems really are and grapple with them. Don't, you know, oh my God, you know, he's got a loud voice and he doesn't like what we're doing. We've got to give in. You know, it's all nonsense. What we need to do nowadays is recover faith in ourselves, faith in our journey, and faith that it's worth getting to as a destination. I think anthroposophy, curiously for me, you know, it's a great shame it didn't work with the Christian community for whatever reason, because as far as I understand, they want their adherents to follow the ritual but then have their own theology. I thought that was revolutionary when I read that, when I heard that. That is clever. So you've got the rubrics of the egregore, you've got the way we all work together, and then you've got a rainbow, a multiple rainbow of different views of what that means in practice. That is breathtakingly lovely. And perhaps we need, oh my God, he's done it again. Perhaps we might need more of that in the immediate future. What do I do now? I'm certainly considering my medley of Oklahoma, because I won't get over, then I'll hand over. I won't get over the fact that Sunday afternoon in the park with George will never be the same again now that Sondheim has actually gone. And how dare he write an opera, a light opera, a comic opera about a painting, managing to please everybody, intellectuals all the way down to your plebeian, all of whom went to see it. What a total bastard. Yeah, so things won't be the same again. And I think we do more than chum lines, John. Handing back.
Well, what do they call that? That's, I guess, a medley. Yeah, I think that at this point, people underestimate the power of the arts. And if you look at the forward movement of history, it's developed out of the arts. It hasn't come from philosophers, that's for sure. I mean, you could say philosophy is the ascent of culture almost. I mean, really, excuse my French, but that's like, as William Irwin Thompson liked to say, the hothouse flowers of academia, talking to each other. And so that's not going to be a central thing, although as important as it is, and it is very important, but it used to be the case, if you go back in the great era of music, you know, back contemporary with, Goethe and Beethoven and Mozart, all of that, you have to keep in mind that there were only so many seats in the theater, and that it wasn't a mass experience like we have today, where people can just go and find these things, but that it was something that influenced the people of influence at that time, and that's who was there. You know, when Richard Wagner's opera Parsifal was performed, there was, you know, I don't know, a couple hundred people there, right? You know, it wasn't a mass movement, but yet it had a mass effect in that it affected the minds of a great many people. And when you get into understanding the underpinnings of culture and pertaining to myth and legend and all the lore that can build around a nation, it becomes increasingly relevant to understand how long these things have been around, who they've influenced, and how did it come about? Like, if you get into the Arthurian legend, for example, actually that wasn't something that was filtering through British society over hundreds of years. It really wasn't. It was something that was lost and that was retrieved through, I forget the poet who was the first one to publish it. I have a copy of the book here, but it was one of the Romantic poets that brought out an edition of Malory, and so when you get into the Arthurian legend, and then it was picked up as a poetic device by a great many poets and writers, and so a whole almost cottage industry developed around Arthurian lore. And then you have the Pre-Raphaelites with the fabulous Arthurian themed tapestries and paintings. And so it gave the British people something to feel proud about. And it was a retrieving of their national destiny, which was extremely important. And it's still there, and it is something to be treasured, and getting into understanding the miracle of Glastonbury and all of these aspects of British lore. It's been a profound influence. I mean, you have Alfred Lord Tennyson, who writing marvelous poetry regarding the Arthurian legends, and so that's something that was retrieved. Just as Richard Wagner retrieved the Lohengrin story and the Parsifal story and the Ride of the Valkyrie, all these things regarding German culture. That was a resurrection. Those weren't things that were on people's mind. Those were things that were said. He was saying, look at this. If we are going to become, and he was very socially conscious, that he realized that having all these diverse German states was not helping anybody. It was just helping the few landowners and lords and ladies and all of that. And he was very much into trying to get things working for a larger group of people. And he saw an understanding of the mythic backdrop of German society would give them a unity of purpose that could help them solve some of these insoluble problems. Because you go back that period of time, I mean, in Germany, as in London, and other places, you had families starving in the streets and all sorts of bad things going on. But that becomes problematic too, because there's this whole exchange between the individual relative to the society. And if you centralize something, you create a power base. And anytime you create a power base, you attract those characters that want to be there controlling the power. And so it's just the prince of this world gets to play out all of his little schemes with great efficiency. And so that's a great deal of what we're looking at. I mean, if you go back in the history of Christianity, where I talked before, had to do with the transition that started to happen in the 4th century, that the spiritual basis of Christianity was diverted into the church becoming a legal entity like the Roman Empire. And so it became a codification of laws, and that bishops, instead of being sources of spiritual inspiration, became like lawyers.
Is that a go at me being a bishop of the Liberal Catholic Church? How dare you? I can't. Oh God, I wish I had the money of a lawyer. Oh God, you've triggered something. I think I told you. Was it on the show or off air? I can't remember. Somebody a while back accused me of being a one-issue liberal. And I thought, oh my God, where does that leave me? My God, do they have a point? I think the matter of Britain is I love Gallo-Roman romances, Le Morte d'Arthur and all the rest of it. And certainly, I think those recurrent themes in British society. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking about Wagner, about Sir Harrison Birtwistle, whose recent opera, The Green Knight. I mean, it's a spectacular achievement, to be honest. I only lasted 2 hours when I went to see the version I went to see, and you can only watch the knights in question go around the circle of the zodiac for so many times on a stage. I'm sorry, I'm flesh and blood. I need to move. I need to go to the restroom. I need coffee. I need something to keep the circulation going. But that doesn't mean it's not an incredible achievement. And it belongs. It responds. I'm going to get into so much trouble. You can terminate my part in this conversation now, John. It actually does link in with something like a folk soul. I mean, I noticed Rudolf Steiner's work, was it a year or so back? You must have noticed yourself. It suddenly came, excuse me, out of attack from nowhere because he believed in folk souls, and people were talking about him and describing him in the worst of all derogatory terms, with me thinking that is low. I mean, look at the man and what he's done and what he's achieved, and they're homing in on one particular modern fashion and attacking with a misunderstanding of what he meant by the folk soul in the first place. I personally do believe in folk souls. I don't know what that means. These are mystical ideas. I've got a rough idea of the concept, the notion, and I can certainly see some sort of invisible threading between various members of an ethnic group. And no, I'm not saying an ethnic group is this sort of limited, defined body. God, if things were that simple, then a lot of our modern woes would be washed away overnight, but they're not. Ethnicity is highly complex and interweaves itself on a number of levels in a number of ways. But no, I think it's impossible to say, unless you're a clod, unless you've got no higher sensibilities at all, that listening to Fantasia on a theme by Thomas Tallis, Vaughan Williams, of course, and not hearing the soul of England singing, if you can't do that, then there's something clod-like in you. If you really never, ever understand any of the romances, and even awful movies like Camelot, there's something there that's not usual in a musical. There's something there that resonates beyond the fact that even Vanessa Redgrave as Guinevere is overacting, which just isn't like her. There's some right. This is an oxymoron. There's some intangible substance that makes it more than what it is on paper or on the stage or on a screen or read aloud as poetry. And I think we throw away these perceptions at our peril, and certainly we throw away that side of Steiner's work at our peril because it's very revealing. We mustn't be the victims of fashion. I mean, certainly I agree 100%. How many philosophers, how many scientists, my God, they give into egotism and money much more quickly than philosophers. How many of them have actually bettered the human condition? Not many. Has there actually been a scientific theory that has stood the test of time? I mean, the textbooks for kids, they present it like this sort of seamless flow of advancement. But these are textbooks for kids. And Newton came along and destroyed Ptolemy. Basically, Einstein destroys nearly everything that went before him. Yes, he may have got a few good ideas and a few insights, but basically he says, nah, they got it wrong. There we are. We've got to think, what is enriching us and how many people in that particular field are doing that, and how many people do we learn from? How, is it their calling? Is it their vocation? Or are they people simply making a buck in a rather unpleasant way, in a rather fraudulent way? And sadly, that's the large majority of people, which always makes me think of the arts and the fact esoteric knowledge in the past, as you know full well, was put in the arts. It wasn't put in the sciences. It was put in paintings, it was put in poetry, it was put in dance. I mean, I remember to this day Gurdjieff making fun of Western rationalists. And I always thought he was too hard on Western rationalism. You know, what was it? A couple of bored libertines that will end up on a dung heap. I'm paraphrasing. That's a bit harsh. You know, I mean, you get modern medicine, you get transport systems. You know, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, there is something there. But he had a point. Whereas the artistic community, yes, I'm biased. The artistic community can boast of person after person after person after person after person who's not only achieved a wider vision, but has shared it and inspired the search for a wider vision in those people that have attended the concert, seen the painting, read the poem. It's almost like sort of a Zen line of transmission. It's almost like an apostolic line. You know, the person has been in what was it, the Mysterium Tremendum. I can't remember the name of the guy offhand, Rudolf Otto, who wrote about that. But the arts give voice. I mean, Schopenhauer, I'm rambling and I'll finish after this bit of rambling. I mean, I like him as a philosopher. I think he's incredibly misunderstood. Is he the philosopher of pessimism? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe yes, maybe no. Or is he what he thought someone tutored in the Western mathematico-physics tradition, who was an adherent of Kant, who had managed to align Western civilization once again? That's the caveat that goes missing from most of the studies of Schopenhauer I've ever seen. He doesn't say for the first time ever, he says once again. He believes he's managing to align the entirety of Western culture with its Hindu basis, with the mysteries of the East, with all of the things that we either originated from or have some sort of indirect relationship to ourselves. And he describes it as this great, as a metaphor, you know, mountain of knowledge, which he's managed to somehow represent and unearth for a modern generation, for new times. And of course, without Schopenhauer, you don't get people like Wagner. No, I mean, the arts, and it never surprises me that funding in the arts is always such a cutthroat business compared to the sciences. Come up with a nasty idea in the sciences and you'll get money really quickly. Come up with an enlightening idea in the arts and you'll be begging on the streets for the next 20 years. Handing back, John.
Yeah, well, you're bringing back memories. Yeah, well, back in my heyday, so to speak, Douglas Gabriel, my best buddy and one of the two principals of American Intelligence Media, he was referred to Kathleen Kennedy, and Kathleen Kennedy was is the wife of George Lucas, and because George Lucas was putting together what became Star Wars, right? And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about Joseph Campbell and all that, and he was in the mix. There's no question about it. He was in the mix. But see, Kathleen Kennedy was familiar with Waldorf education. They were involved in that whole mix of putting kids into Waldorf schools and all of that, and they wanted to consult with Werner Glass, who was the head of the Waldorf Teacher Training Institute here in Michigan, and he was the leading Waldorf educator in North America. He was a mentor of Marilyn Monroe and a great many other people, and one of the leading lights in theater in the United States. And theater is a very important component of anthroposophy, in that the Goetheanum is one of its functions was to be a theater for the production of the plays of Rudolf Steiner and also other artistic creations and performance of Eurythmy. And so it's a center for the arts, really. But Werner Glass was approached by Kathleen Kennedy to be a consultant for this film that they were trying to put together. And George Lucas had this sketch, and but Werner pulled in Douglas, and he said, "Can you handle this?" and set him up with Kathleen Kennedy. And to make a long story short, he was a consultant for the plot structure and character structure and the mythic content of Star Wars. And later on, with Indiana Jones and the search for the Holy Grail and all that kind of stuff. During that same time, that put us into a circle of people, and I was approached about being a consultant on the film First Night with Richard Gere and Sean Connery, and it was about Lancelot and all of that. But I mean, I got at loggerheads with them because, to me, that's like an initiation lore story, and that Lancelot is he's tied into the Lady of the Lake, and that's that whole idea of the super sensible breathing all the way through it. But they wanted to make him like he's this like kind of more of a medieval James Bond character or something like that, and running around having fun with the ladies. And so that, yeah, well, it's you know, it was an okay movie, but if you get into understanding in the so-called Dark Ages, which weren't dark at all, that was when there was still this strongly spiritual content that was the emphasis. And you have the idea of, for example, the legend of Lohengrin. This exemplifies a great deal because, see, if you get into the Grail legend, the Grail Knights are beings that, in understanding Northern European culture, that remained with clairvoyant capacity beyond other cultures. They didn't develop an intellectual culture until quite late, and so they still maintained a clairvoyant relationship. And you see it in the Vikings with the ideas about Valhalla, and you can read legends from the Crusades and all that, where they speak as if it's a matter of fact that, you know, Charlemagne was leading the army in a particular battle in the Crusades, even though he'd been, you know, he died hundreds of years earlier. So there's, what is that element that's there? And that's that idea of the inspiration of the line from which you come, that there's this level of inspiration coming from the realm of your ancestors and the angels and the archangels that plays into this whole idea, but it was viewed as something very, very real. And so what a swan knight was, as in the case of Lohengrin, was a knight who was capable of receiving inspiration from one of the Grail Knights, that he could be what they would call a kaya, or vehicle in the Eastern tradition. So you have your Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakaya, right? So that's Atma Buddha Manas in the Buddhist tradition. But this is whole idea that you become an embodiment of a higher being, and because of that, you have certain capacities, certain powers that are entrusted to you through that sacred lineage, right? And so that gets back to the early Gnostic concept of the Pistis Sophia. Pistis Sophia means faith and wisdom. And pistis in the early sense, in the Gnostic sense, it was a power. It wasn't just, I have faith, you know, meaning that there's like this kind of feeling of helplessness associated with faith, is that, you know, you're just have faith, and it's something that's this trust that you have. Whereas in actuality, it's an occult power that you receive through aligning yourself with the Christ impulse, and that gives you, in essence, supernormal capacities to be able to accomplish your goals. And so it's a very real thing. That's what's called upon in the time in which we're living. We're in need of individuals that are capable of becoming kayas, of becoming embodiments of the higher impulses of the divine spiritual powers, because there's so much chaos ruling in our world, because so many people have allowed themselves to find their inspiration from the lower powers, from the minions of mammon. And mammon isn't just money. It's money, disease, death, all these things that crawled out of Pandora's box when she opened it. And so if we're to hold these forces at bay, it's up to us to commit ourselves to having faith. And through that faith, we receive the power to accomplish.
That's strange. It came up as one of the themes of our service of worship today. I mean, I wanted to keep it all very light-hearted for the simple reason some people have a very tough time over the Christmas period. So I wanted to, some people are talking almost as though it's on the verge of going to war. They were fully prepared and so on. It was Christmas. So I was trying to keep things very light-hearted. It succeeded to an extent. But I noticed the underlying theme that was going around the room was faith and the necessity for faith, and realizing faith wasn't simply the assent to something, that it actually was quite an active thing and a configuration of many things. Certainly, I mean, something that's not an oxymoron, faith in gnosis, is something I'd love to explore a lot more, not only in my own work, but in my ministry. I think it terrifies certain people, and I'm not really certain why. Nobody is forced at gunpoint to suddenly discover greater realizations. The bodhisattvas aren't manhandling anybody into a state of enlightenment. I don't quite know. You're not dragged there kicking and screaming. If you don't want to go, don't go. But it's nice to have the option there, surely. And my reading, I was going through some of the Gnostics again, as is my wont, the other day, and listening to Chuck Missler. Everybody knows I'm an admirer of Chuck Missler, but when he drops the ball, he drops the ball. I was listening again the other day to his talk on the Gnostics, which is really pitiably embarrassing. And them tampering with scriptures, please, a man of your intelligence, this isn't good enough at all. We do need faith, and we need a busload to get forward. We need a busload to get forward, but we also need those, are they intuitive, those higher impulses coming from somewhere else. Yeah, I agree with you, John, like a power, like a force, like a beckoning, a sentient beckoning from elsewhere to experience those mysteries of light. What's happening at the moment, I think we're entering into a real dark age, where darkness and mayhem are somehow seen as sexy. How on earth could they be sexy? And, basically people are attacking Christianity. The only thing you're not allowed to be now is a Christian. You can be anything else and you'll be attacked, but you won't be attacked on the same level as you are if you're a Christian, which is they're trying to, certain parties are trying to frame as either pure toxic patriarchy or basically a bit silly, neither of which are true, neither of which are accurate, neither of which are profound definitions of anything particularly. It's interesting what you said about Star Wars. I mean, wasn't it Lucille Ball who was the first investor? I seem to remember reading somewhere that Lucas was getting absolutely nowhere and money wouldn't come along. It was Lucille Ball, my favorite communist from Hollywood, who was the woman of vision. My God, how much did she make if she invested in Star Wars? So yeah, I mean, there was all that going on. I didn't realize Joseph Campbell could be sidelined to that extent, but I know you and I know your research. Certainly, I thought he had more of a sort of an input than that. But yeah, the mythic elements of Star Wars are clear. It just makes me a little sad, I suppose, that is becoming mythic in no recognizable sense. And if anything, it's part of the new fantasy reality, yes, a day of oxymorons, that's governing Western culture. And now we live in a society where everybody's a genius about everything and no one's an authority on anything because everybody is a genius. You've got to think, well, hang on, does that also mean, and I love the Marvel Universe, I love Iron Man, I love the Mighty Thor, I love the Incredible Hulk, I wish I could go green every time someone had pissed me off, it would be really great. But they're taking the place of legends and lore, and that is not appropriate and that is not right. Because there's the transition between basic storytelling, which is human, we all need stories as human beings, and fantasy, which is one of the most delicate and delightful forms of narrative. And that slowly shading into something like local legends and local mythic histories, before it gets to further shades into the actual reality of the folk soul itself. All of that seems to be going missing now. I mean, it is my want sometimes to look at TikTok. Yes, I'm sorry. Both hands are up. I'm guilty. You can all shoot me. I don't care. And sometimes I contribute to TikTok. Ha! But I'm sorry. Some of those dances are incredibly impressive. I'm sorry they are. But what worries me is that there are young men on TikTok speaking with a quasi-religious adulation about a new comic with Batman. I love Batman. It's a story. It's a fantasy. I can't get worked up that way about Batman because it's that and it's nothing more. Sorry. I think we're in very dangerous territory at the minute. I mean, I noticed there was some girl on TikTok. Why do they always have short pink hair? Who was going around, and her figures are off the scale now, going around saying she didn't think ancient Rome existed. I mean, where do we go from there? I mean, what next? I don't think John Barnwell exists. I think the whole thing's a fantasy. I'm imagining something after a heavy lunch on Sunday afternoon. I know he's not there because I've not actually physically met him. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And we've got to try and find ways to navigate behind different types of discourse and different qualities of narrative. The forbidden word nowadays, quality, everything's quantity, everything's a lot of something, but no one must ever talk about the qualitative aspect of anything because that's religious. But that's exactly what needs to come back, not only as a stabilizing force in ourselves as individuals, but as a culture as well, as a series of related cultures, which I really don't want to see thrown in the trash bin, as many people do. I mean, okay, let's do that. Do they really think the communist Chinese are going to worry too much about LGBTQIA plus rights? Of course they're not. Of course they're not. We've got to be really careful about what we're attacking and what we're throwing away. Back to you, John.
Well, to get back to the thread I was building, again, to embody principles, it goes back, it reminds me of, I used to study Aikido, which is a martial art that was started in Japan, and it was started by the top samurai in Japan, who was so respected by the emperor that when World War II started, he disagreed. He didn't think that Japan should have gone to war. And rather than just being taken out, as usually would happen to people that went against the emperor or whatever, he let him, Ueshiba Morei, go up into the mountains with his principal students, and they spent the whole war. He trained them in Aikido, and didn't come down until after the war was over. But if you look at Ueshiba and how he was capable of developing in this, what I'm talking about with this capacity that you'd see him at 80 years old defending himself against 3 expert swordsmen, and all he's using is a paper fan. And so you see that there's a reality behind what I'm talking about, and the way in which Ueshiba explained it himself, that he was a poet, and he said all the gods in the universe turn into purple smoke and enter my body. And were you to try and confront Ueshiba, it's as if you're confronting nature itself, that he's become a representative of a cosmic principle. He's not merely a human being, as if there is such a thing, by the way, because the whole world in which you see is an expression of the Logos, and a human being is an expression of the Logos on earth, so that you actually are a very high equivalency in your being as being a human being is quite an exalted role, were anybody capable of rising to the occasion of what it's supposed to represent. And so in understanding that in the spiritual sense is that the New Jerusalem is already here. It's just that we have not elevated our consciousness to the point to where we're full participants in the heritage of which we are the recipients. And so it's a reality that we're talking about. It's not some kind of fictive. And Rene Guénon's Reign of Quantity. Yeah, see, Rene Guénon, I think he misses the point so bad, because he has this very kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but he has this very exclusive view of this what we call the perennial philosophy, as if it's like some kind of private club, and if you don't understand his way of describing it, then you're not one of them. And so I'm of the opposite view, is that if you're actively attempting to engage yourself in this process we call the quest of becoming human, then bravo to you. And according to the rules of Hipsisterianism, that you're doing something worthwhile, whether or not you're even good at it. And so it's a completely different view of the matter. And so to get into the ivory tower of Rene Guénon is to try and denigrate the honest virtues and attributes of other people that are striving to meet the mark. And so that's, I think, the problem with Rene Guénon, beside the point of that he's too far out. I mean, he converted to Islam, but he has this Advaita Vedanta take on Islam that is only found to be acceptable to a very limited number of people within the Islamic community. So, and he thinks he's like uber orthodox, and he's way out there. So and that's okay. He's trying. I know. I have no doubt he was sincere. I just think that I consider him an intellectual pursuit. You know, I don't consider him a guru. He's an exceedingly bright student, and that's my evaluation of him. And so I don't mean to condescend on somebody's hero. And I have a dear friend of mine is one of his principal publisher in English, but I'm sorry. Same goes for Valentin Tomberg. I mean, he's exceedingly bright, but I don't consider him to be an initiate, not of the stature of someone like a Rudolf Steiner or Stylianos Sateslis or I don't know. You fill in the blanks. I really don't want to get into. Again, it gets back to what I was saying about Munisaru, one of his pupils was being confronted about something, and he said to him, I said to the fellow, and I've said this before, he said, could you leave your body consciously at will? And the guy said, well, no. And he said, well, why am I listening to you? And so when it comes to being an initiate, it's not how many books you've read. It has to do, there's actual pistis, there's actual powers of faith that result it's an achievement, and it's an actual attainment, and if you're striving for that, then good on you. I don't care what tradition you're in, but if you're attempting to contribute to the positive value of being human, then you're within the camp of the Hipsterians, and that's a good thing. I don't see it just because you're in the wrong club that you're going to be called on the rug, so to speak. And so I'm with you, David. I don't know what to say, but I think there's a lot of heroes out there and heroines that underestimate their capacity to be able to change the world, even if only homeopathically. And the idea that a crime can be stopped by just having one conscious person in the room, and they don't even have to do anything, but there's a certain impulse that comes with bearing these kinds of impulses that can change the behavior of people because of being in the presence of somebody who's serving that positive impulse. And that's, I think, what I want to say is that if you're in groups, be careful, don't create problems. Although this is a war, it's a war of ideas. We don't want to see this thing escalate into actual physical problems that are the kind of things that result from abstract materialism. I'm sorry, but abstract materialism only knows one end game, and that's conflict.
No, I think you've sort of taken what I wanted to say there. I think people are having fantasy put on them to stop them realizing their potential and stop them realizing the reality of the true power that they actually have, the true immensity of their being. I mean, I suppose some people have called me a personalist. I think that's probably slight. I hate labels. They're fun, but if you go beyond the fun, if you take them seriously beyond a certain point, then it means nothing. I like personalism more than existentialism, even though I hugely respect the existentialists, because you're always left with a question mark, and the personalists want to actually answer the question mark, and they ground their knowledge in the human. I think that's incredibly important. If you're going to face the existential, your journey mustn't, your point of reference mustn't be grounded in the existential. It must be grounded in yourself. I see fantasy as the real result of no proper education, because people shouldn't be told to stop fantasizing. They should be told to put it in its correct perspective. I mean, there's no real education in schools, colleges now, not really, and it's the lack of religion. Who do I blame for all of these tidal waves of nonsense surging around our society? Church people, we're to blame. Are we offering anything uplifting and real and powerful and beautiful to counteract it all? No, we're not. Certainly, I think, oh God, I admit it, right? I admit it, everybody. I love the traditionalists. There, I've said it. Hang me. I love the traditionalists. But they're not people to be worshipped. They're interesting thinkers. Some of them are very good writers. There's a point that it could be argued they're the real bohemians as opposed to the people that say they're bohemians. It could be argued in that way. And there's nothing wrong in disagreeing with them, and there's nothing wrong in picking up something of substance and saying that bit was good and I hated the other bit. And I agree with you 100% about our little Rene. I mean, Muslims don't think highly of his work. which has to be borne in mind. I mean, it is something to do with Islam. Yeah, I like the cutting edge that they try to get into their work. I think it's very important. But even then, we've got to think: are they people of experience? And I'll tell you what I had in mind by that. I mean, I have seen ectoplasm, which I can tell people now. It's amber coloured. It rushes across the ceiling, at least in my particular case, like something electrical. This sudden amber flurry from one end of the room to the other, and then it drops suddenly. Then it's gone. I've seen that. I've seen the materialization of little heads, nasty, evil little heads around a medium. Therefore, what worries me is that all of these things are working in the world of phenomena. In the world, let's face it, in the world of crime. Most of it's just nasty and short-term gain. But if you really want to get in with the masters of this particularly toxic, necrotic field, sooner or later you're going to run up against the occult. And it is going to be very unpleasant indeed, and you are going to regret it. So why can't we sing loudly about white magic as well, and about the things that show us the promise of human potential and where we could be going, and the journey that we're all on as pilgrims into a much greater absolute? That for me is much more exciting than kids on an Xbox talking rubbish about the new graphics. Are some of the new graphics I've seen amazing? Yes, there we are. Has it made your life better? Are you a more rounded human being? Are you a more successful human being? Are you more loving? Do you have more people around you that care about you? And if the answer to that is none of them, there's something wrong. What was it? Intels? There's some new classification going around at the minute where somebody that's an enforced celibate, and they go, incel, is that it? Is that the new word, incel? There was a terrible shooting here. Is it true that terrible shootings only happen in America? No, it's not. It's just other medias deal with it in different ways, right? So in Britain, it suddenly becomes the fault of the social workers, even if there's not a single social worker involved. It's all their fault. They should have known what they were doing. So there was one incel recently that shot somebody down, a couple of people. And so he didn't have a girlfriend. Have you ever thought of putting your Xbox down and going somewhere to meet a girl? Have you ever thought of doing that? And she wouldn't have liked his, even if he'd have had a girlfriend, she wouldn't have liked, he wasn't that fat, by the way. She wouldn't have liked his fat body. Then get off your ass, stop eating so much and go to the gym. It's all this. What was it? Alex Jones. I mean, he did a monumental and famous rant, the Justin Bieber rant, which I absolutely love, where he ends up screaming for no particular reason at all about Justin Bieber. Maybe we all need to do something like that. The globalists, yes, I do believe there are globalists. Yes, I do believe there are certain types of conspiracy at work. That doesn't explain the whole of globalism, some of which is very positive, and that's not being discussed. There can be positive elites. That's not what we're discussing at the moment. We're discussing gangs of criminals. Do certain groups have human slavery in mind forever? Yes, they do. And it gets into all sorts of strange territories like AI. Is AI a good thing or a bad thing? Neither. It's a technique. I've heard of applications now, not in the future, of AI that help people move around. Without the AI support, their limbs would have frozen years ago. A miracle. But if you want people to put that into society at large, and that's being encouraged by the graphic novelist myth makers of the present, that you're some sort of weird human cyborg, then the first thing I want to know is, okay, is it sexy? I don't know. It doesn't do much for me. But is it sexy? Sorry, that's not the right question. The question is, can you be turned off at source? If you upset the wrong people, can somebody flick a switch and then you're gone? That strikes me as, apart from being the greatest betrayal of the human condition and human potential in the whole of history as the real sorts of questions we need to ask. You look absolutely horrified, John. I'm handing back to you.
No, actually, I think you're really quite wonderful in the way in which you're able to try and enfold humanity with a sense of authenticity. That when I get the feeling when you speak that you really mean what you say, which is something that never happens when I'm watching TV. So that being said, at some point, I think, look into it. I'm sure you already have, but in coming to understand these things, it had me bring to mind Wesley Tudor Pole. Okay, and he's somewhat of a hero over in Britain, and he's a very key figure in what is called the Matter of Britain, which is the Arthurian lore. And but he was born in 1884 and he died in 1968, and he is really quite important in British history during World War II. He was the individual who came up with the silent minute. That was his collaboration with Winston Churchill, and it united the British people every evening at 9 p.m. with the chiming of Big Ben on the radio, and they would have a silent minute, and that was very much fortifying for the British people, and calling on something higher, that there's some kind of higher purpose in life, that they hadn't fallen into the bowels of atheism at all, and it was very much it's impossible to be able to evaluate the positive result of the silent minute in the spirit of the British folk soul and the British people at that time. So given that that dark period was so challenging, and they were led into so much that led on into the Remembrance Day observance, and he was able to create mythic reality for the British people, just as one guy. And he's really just a guy. I mean, yeah, he was from he's Tudor Pole, so bad. Yeah, it's arguably he had a greater claim to the throne than the current residents at Buckingham. But it was a very difficult relationship. He had an extremely troubled relationship with his family, but he was very well traveled. So I think we're going to look into doing an episode just about this guy, because he represents what we've been talking about for the whole show here, I think. And so that'll be fun to get into one of these episodes. But that being said, we want to get into the mythic content of Reverend David and him protecting the matter of Britain and the Shakespearean aspect of British culture with his Grammar of Witchcraft, a Shakespearean study. No, it's not a grimoire. It's not going to help you enchant. Well, it could help you enchant, but not at the expense of other people. And you have his Caliban's Redemption, his Shakespearean-esque poetry, and his Mount Athos Inside Me, that was criticized by Richard, we'll call him Richard What's-His-Name. It was criticized by Richard What's-His-Name, but this is I think a wonderful book. It's very, very heartfelt, and it's edited by the very talented Daniela Induced, and those are all available on Amazon. And so I wholeheartedly recommend them to add to your collection. You know, we're into things that people, they're called books, and people don't resort to them much anymore. But for those that do, those are wonderful acquisitions. Also, myself, I'm written a couple volumes. I'm sure most of you already know this, but for those that don't, my first volume is The Arcana of the Grail Angel, the spiritual science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order. And it has a foreword by Douglas Gabriel of American Intelligence Media, and it's loaded with diagrams. It's some 640 pages with extensively footnotes or references, and then and a lot on the matter of Britain and Arthurian and Grail lore, the mythic content about which we've been speaking. But the full series of diagrams from that book are reproduced in my second book, the Grail diagrams, but I added a great deal, many more, so that there's a lot that could be gleaned in trying to envision this path that we're all on. And that one has a foreword by the noted astrosopher William Bento. My books are available in the continental United States on eBay. If you're outside the US, you can contact me through my academia link that's below, or you could also contact me via private message on Facebook, and I can make an arrangement through PayPal or something like that. If you want to buy us a cup of coffee, that'd be great. Any amount is appreciated, even $1. And but for David, it's paypal.me/dparry777. And for myself, it's paypal.me/John Barnwell 888. And we enjoy those cups of coffee. And I also want to acknowledge my principal sponsors for my shows, and that's Tyla and Vadim. And there's also been quite a few others that have contributed over the years. And yes, it has been years, because we're in our 66th episode, which is quite remarkable in and of itself. Before long, we're going to be into the 78, a full tarot deck. You know, we've already surpassed the playing card deck quite a while ago. And so we're just trying to contribute however we can in helping people try to realize that faith is a power. And so, David, I think at this point, you probably have some closing remarks and could lead us into consecration into the Christmas season, and that'd be wonderful.
Gosh, do I have many remarks? No, I think the Britain that I resonate most with, Gertrude Lawrence, Noel Coward, even that seems to be threatening to some people nowadays. I've absolutely no idea why. But it's hard to think of anything that's not threatening to some people. And is that really how we want to live? Do we want to live in a world of fears and anxieties and they're all out to get us, or do we want to live in a world where we're looking for mutual understanding? You suggested to me an alternate prayer last week, which I wasn't sure I wanted to do, because I'm still looking for some potent Celtic stuff, but I think I do want to do the one you suggested last week in one of its Celtic variants to end this week. My friends, may Christ always be before you. May Christ always be behind you. May Christ always be to the left of you. May Christ always be to the right of you. May Christ in his wisdom always guard you from beneath. And may Christ in all his glory guard you from above. And mostly, may that Christ light be within you. Amen.
Amen. Yes. St. Patrick's Christ's breastplate. And that's a wonderful potency of faith, if there ever was one. Try to envision the early Celtic Christians going into a Viking camp and saying, I'm here, and pulling it off. So with you, I hope that you can find the same courage to be able to be a constant source of inspiration for those around you. And may you all go into the beginning of the Christmas season with good cheer. Amen.